Hello everyone, I hope you're having a good day or night. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to make our own functions from scratch, and as well as some other functions, including the mapping function, which allows us to basically run the same code over and over again instead of us having to like copy and paste the same thing. Um, so I'm going to make a new R script file first, and I'll load up Tidyverse, which should be good for now. And I'll name this R script file custom functions. Okay. So the way that making your own function works is that you basically will be structuring a function from scratch, giving it the arguments that are required um, to actually run the code, and as well as the output that you want to give based on the actions that occur when you run the code. So the way you create it so that you can use this function multiple times is by assigning it to a storage object, which we've been doing throughout the course. So let's make a basic function that takes temperatures that are in Fahrenheit and changes it to Celsius. So um, so let's call it. So the first thing we do is name it. So let's call it var to cells. And the way we tell R that we want to make a function is by writing function. And then we start out with the first thing we write is the argument or the input that has to go in. So the only thing we're inputting is a temperature that's in Fahrenheit. So we do temp F, and then once we have that, now we do an open bracket. And this is where you start writing the actual code that R will be executing when you call upon this function. So first, so what we're basically doing is, it's very simple. We're taking in temp F, and then we're changing it to a temperature that would be in Celsius. So the output we're getting is temperature Celsius. So we want to make a storage object that will have that number, and that number will be what we input temp F. So this here will jump here, and then minus 32. So the equation for how to go from Fahrenheit to Celsius is you subtract it by 32, and then you multiply it by 5 divided by 9. So times 5 divided by 9. So if you do this, return, and then the last thing we do is what we want the output for the function to return. So what's going to happen here is we will give this function var to cells a temperature in Fahrenheit. It will put it into this equation and assign it to this object, temperature C, and then it will return into the console the temperature in Celsius. So let's run it. So when we run this code, now we can just we can format how we want to, like, the input in multiple ways. We could either just write so since this input here is called temp F, we can write temp F is equal to 32, and then run it. Oh, we didn't run the actual function. Okay, so now this function got stored in the environment. Now we can use it, and it says it's a function. And now you can run it, and you can see here that the console gave a value of 0. With another number. So let's say we did it with 212, which should be 100. Nice. So we know it works. And then we can just do random number like 55 in case we're curious. All right. So now we know that the temperature in Fahrenheit of 55 is 12.77. So we could do that, or we can just write it in what's called like a non-explicit form, where we just write, instead of saying like the argument is equal to, we can just write the value. So like we do 212 again, and then run the code, and it gave the same answer as if you just wrote temp F is equal to 212. So that's just like a very simple, it's a very simple example. And in addition to just writing these numbers out, we could put storage objects that have a number value. We could also make a, but let's say, so that's like a pretty, just like one step, pretty simple function. Let's say we want to make a function that that went from Fahrenheit to Celsius to Kelvin. So what we would do is we could just take this, and we could pass it. We can now make it called R2 Kelvin, and we're still gonna go from Fahrenheit to Celsius, but after we go to Celsius, after we get Celsius, we need to go to Kelvin. So we're actually going to make another function called Celsius to Kelvin, and it's going to be pretty similar to the one we previously made, but it's going to be specific to Kelvin and Celsius. So, and it went a little out of order here, but basically what I want to show you is that you can use functions, already existing functions, inside a function when you're like making a new function, and it will be able to call upon that function and work. So to go from Celsius to Kelvin, all you need to do is add 273.15. And then what we want to do after that is return the temperature in Kelvin. So the same format. Just run this. And now we just wanted to show that now instead of writing the same thing over again, if we want to go from Fahrenheit to Kelvin, instead of writing all this code, we can just write like, so now we can just say temp C. We can use the functions we already made. So temp C is var to cells. So we already have that function. So now we just you want to give in the argument you get here, and then after that, then you go to then you do temp K, which is it is cells to Kelvin, and then you're gonna just pump in this number, so you get from here to here, then you get out temp C. And temp C you pump into temp C here, and then you get to temp K, and then we're going to be getting temp K out. So we make part Kelvin, and we're gonna test the code, and then we can just do so bar to Kelvin. So if we did 32, it should be, it's 0, like we did before, it's 0 in Celsius. So then if you add 270, so then it should just be 273.15 in Kelvin. So if we run it, we get 273.15. And this was just to show that you can make functions and then put them into a new function to save space on code. There are objects here like temp C that you cannot, you can't really get an intermediate object. So you can't really pull out this object when you're running this code. You only really get this last one. It doesn't store this. R doesn't store it. So there is another cool thing we can do with functions, which is to make graphs. Like let's say we need to make a graph that has the same outcome but different predictors, so the same y-axis, different x-axis, and we're just changing that one thing. And let's say and if you wrote it all out in ggplot, it's a lot of code. So what we can do is we can make a function that has ggplot code in it, and then all we have to do is change the argument, just like 1 or 2 arguments, and we can change the title as well. So let's do making function for code. So first we need to read in data, and the data that we'll read in, I already got here, so I'll move this into the working directory like we always have. It's here. So as you'll see in this data set, we have a text file. So we're actually not going to be using read CSV. We're going to be using a different code we haven't used before, but it is in the tidyverse package. So this data has information on cirrhosis data, as well as like demographic data, and it's more of a population level data set. So let's just make a data set called alcohol, and the way we read in this this data set is through the read table 2, and now we just need to put in the path file. So and then slash. Okay. So now we have that data. So open this up. We have I think this is cities. So these observations are cities, not individuals. So these are rates of cirrhosis death, liquor consumption in each city. So let's say we wanted to use cirrhosis death as our outcome of interest, and we wanted to make plots to see how each of these variables, like wine and liquor consumption, how their association looks with cirrhosis death. So we're gonna, instead of making like a bunch of ggplot code and copy and pasting a lot, which can lead to a lot of errors, we're just gonna make a function that that allows us to just plug in one thing and keep the cirrhosis thing the same. So let's call it make scatter, and it'll make a scatter plot using ggplot. So the function, so the arguments that we're going to need is the data frame. So that's going to be the first argument. Then we're going to get the x variable. That's going to change from one graph to the next. Then we could change the title, so just like what it says on the plot, and then we could change the header as well. So now that we have that, we could actually write the code. So we can just make we can call the ggplot object, we just call it graph, and that's what's eventually going to be returned by the function. So ggplot data equals data frame that we give it. Then we're now writing in the ggplot grammar or structure. So we're going to make scatter plot. So we use g_on_point, and then just the way this works within when you're like making these functions, instead of using aesthetics, just AES, you use AES string. So you have to make sure to do that because that's what R likes. And then we'll just call it xvar. So that's what's getting plugged in from here. And then we'll do comma. Well, y is going to be the same. It's always going to be the same in this case because we're plotting the same. We're plotting the same outcome, so we don't want to change that. So we'll do parentheses cirrhosis death, and then plus. So now we're adding a label argument, labs argument. So x is going to be, so the label for the x-axis is going to be whatever we plug into the x title. And then for y, it's going to be cirrhosis death rate, because that's always going to be the same, because that's the only outcome we're looking at this moment. Title is going to be the header that we plug in, that we put here. So now we've accounted for all of these. And then now we're just going to, for fun, I'm just going to add a theme to it. And that should be it. Now we can just do, lastly, return graph. And that's going to return the graph that we end up printing out. Okay, hopefully this works. Let's see what happens when we try to test it out. Okay. So let's say we wanted to see how, I guess, the ranking or the measurement of urban population, how that is linked to cirrhosis death. So we're just use make scatter as the function. and then just fill it out as we would any other function. So first we do the data frame with alcohol, and I'm just gonna press enter after each one, just so it's like easy to read, and it's not just a one long line. And then the function we're doing is urban pop. Make sure to put it in parentheses when you're doing this, because sometimes R just doesn't like it. Percent of population, so that the title for the x-axis is going to be percent of population living in urban area. And then the title of the whole graph will be how state cirrhosis death rate differs by state urbanicity. Okay. We run this. Nice. Maybe if I just pause to make sure this can work. Okay, I realized why it wasn't working. So, two things. I need to use the ggplot2 package. So I'm gonna put that. If you want to do this, you need to put that into the. You have to make sure to call that up, and then also I forgot I use this theme. This theme is one of the themes that are provided in the GG themes package. So make sure to run these. So I'm gonna, you can see it here, but I'll just run this again. And you can see that it was able to, put everything we gave it into the function and make a ggplot out of it. And now instead of having to write this whole thing all over again or copy and pasting a bunch of different things, we can just if we want to check with how the how wine consumption per capita is related to cirrhosis deaths in a state, we could follow the same format, and I'll just, since I already typed it out for the first one, I'll just copy and paste what I have. And now, so alcohol, it's going to be the same data set, but now we're just changing the X variable. We're changing the title for the X variable, and then for the X axis, and then we're changing the title for the whole graph. And now you can see wine is on the bottom, and let's see if I can see if the title on the top would change. Okay, so didn't show everything, but it says now it says wine consumption instead of urban state urbanicity. So it's a nice way, if you get the hang of making functions, it's a very nice way to save space on code, so you don't have to keep copy and pasting the same ggplot code all over and over again. So one last thing that I wanted to show about with these functions is another function called map, and or mapping. And mapping is when you want to repeatedly run a function over and over again, instead of like copying and pasting the same code over and over again, you can have this map. You could write the code within the map function, and I'll give an example here. So first of all, the map function comes in a package called per. So, and the symbol for it is a cat. So we'll load in per. And we're going to use the var to cells function as an example of when you might use this. So let's say you had a bunch of cities, like a list of city temperatures that you wanted to, that were in Fahrenheit and you wanted to change it to Celsius. So let's say you had the temperature in California, Michigan, Georgia, and Minnesota. And you wanted to, so let's assign these random temperatures. And then let's say you wanted to see what it would be in Celsius from Fahrenheit. So, and then you want to use that data in another spot. So you would just use, you run all these, and now you have, you did it. Like you have all these temperatures now. But you had to, this required lots of copy and pasting, and it leaves room for error. So, and it's a lot of code. It's like 10 lines of code. So what we can do instead is we can make a list of all of these objects. So step 1, make list. So we'll make a list of all of these functions. I mean, sorry, of all of these temperatures in Fahrenheit. And then what we'll do is we're gonna make so what map does is it allows for a function to go through a list and execute code on each item in a list instead of having to like write the code out for each single one. Since it takes in a list, we're gonna get a list back just with the outcomes. So we'll do temp C list because it's going to be returning us a list of temperatures in Celsius. And we'll do map. And so we're going to give it, the way you format map is first you write the list that you're inputting. So it's temps F. Then you're going to tell it that you're going to be running a function. And you're going to be passing the function, and then you're going to be so basically it's like you're going to have a function and you're going to be passing in a value or an object of X. So once you tell it that, then you tell it what the actual function is. So we said we're going to be using the var to cells. So, and we're going to say, we have to just say that the input, so temp F, which is if you remember, it's the input for fair to cells, it's going to equal X. So basically what this saying is that you're going to be just taking each object from this list, plugging it into a function with the value of X, and then that X is going to get passed into here. It's basically saying like this is going to be the function that's getting run over and over again. And when you run it, now we get this list back. And to call on call on objects of a list, like let's say now we have this list of 4 different temperatures that are in Celsius. To just like draw one out of the list, all you do is you write, so it's you name the list, and then you do double brackets, and then let's say you want the first object, which should be California. You just press that, you run that, and it outputted the temperature in Celsius of California, which is what you can see here. It matches. So that this one line of code did the same work that this and these 4 did. And that's just a very, very simple use of maps. There are examples of using maps and like different forms of map, because this map function is only for lists, but you can use it for there's um, map functions that you can use for vectors and for whole data sets. So it's a pretty powerful function if you just know when to use it and how to use it. So that is, I believe, everything that I wanted to cover. Let me just double check. Oh, actually, um, there is one other thing I wanted to show with making functions. So when you're making a function, you can have it execute code and deliver different things based on certain logical tests you give it. So let's say you want to make a function that returns the answer positive if your input is greater than or equal to 0, or negative if it's less than 0. So it's a very simple test, but it just shows an example of how to use this type of format for making functions. Um, so creating code for functions with additional code, and that just means that based on certain conditions, it'll run different code. So let's call it, the function is pos for neg, and we're making a function, so it's going to be the same thing. The input's just going to be a number, and then you do the same format. So, okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to start out with the first case scenario. So let's say first case we're going to write about is if the number, so the number which is num is less than 0, then so you plug it into, you do another bracket, return negative. So it's basically like you're making a function within a function. So if you want, and by doing this and forming it like this, it will stop reading. If like this scenario is met, this condition is met, that it's less than 0, it'll return negative and then just stop reading the code after. So it won't go into this next code that covers the other possibility, is if the number is greater than or equal to 0, then return okay, close the bracket, and now that should be everything. Okay, this bracket's closed, this bracket's closed. There we go. Okay, so now we'll make this, and I believe if you use return, that will stop the code once it meets the criteria to run this code. So now we'll just test it out, is okay, and then we'll just do 4, 5. My fingers want 5. Positive. Now let's try the negative number, -2. Negative. Nice. And then let's see if it really works. 0. Nice. Positive. Okay. So that's just another type of thing you can use within when you're making a custom function. There's a lot of different other options that are going to be covered in the notes that I send. But I think this was a good just introduction to the things that you can use with the function tool, and an introduction to the map function. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. And I will see you in the next one.